if you're repeating something over and over, and I have said many, many times, whatever, you become what you repeat. So if you're saying to yourself like, hey, I can figure this out, I can learn, I can grow, then you will act in accordance. And I find that there's something about this moment where we are obsessing over things. I'm not even saying they're not real, but we're obsessing over them to the point where it's becoming counterproductive. Like we're seeing things where they aren't necessarily, or we're exaggerating things that are there, but like now we're making them seem just absolutely terrifying. And I think that there's something that people have to be careful about there, that you can make your own life worse by obsessing over the things that are wrong, rather than, like you said, making it somehow external or creating a piece of art around it or something. I don't know, creating something. Like I said, I'm thinking out loud. I don't have my finger fully on why I can sense that there's a problem with it, but there's a problem with it.
I think most definitely. We can feel it in the zeitgeist. It's kind of ugly. It's an ugly energy.
It's an ugly energy. I normally hate that kind of loose talk, but because I don't yet know how to articulate it, that feels really right. So you talked about this earlier, and I can't remember where I first heard this, but the idea that some things make you feel expansive and some make you constrict. This moment feels like a mass constriction, and that's why I worry.
Yeah, and the feeling of openness, which I say occurs historically because we're social animals and things occur in these kind of cultural globs, these generational moments, is because of like memes and being infected by the people around us. And in moments of expansion, your minds are open, you're adventurous, you're exploring. It often comes in these kind of revolutionary periods where people are just so sick of the past 20 years and all the accumulated baggage and all the ways of doing things. They're just tired of it. They want something new. And so they're exploring and they're hungry and they're adventurous for new ideas. And people come up with wild things, but who cares? It's wild, but it's interesting. It's new. There's discussion, there's argument, but people aren't killing each other over it, right? These are great moments in history, and it's a feeling of expansion and adventurousness. So if you have an adventurous spirit, which I think is an incredibly positive quality to have, that means you're continually open to life. You're continually open to what happens, what it brings to you, and you're seeking it out. You want new things. You're learning. You're not closed off. You never have a moment where I know what this is happening, etc. You have what the poet Keats called negative capability. I don't know if you're familiar with that concept.
I am, but because of you.
Oh yeah,
So,
I talked about it in Mastery. It's basically the fact that you can carry in your mind two contradictory ideas and not be upset about that. Because quite honestly, sometimes things are contradictory and they're true, right? It's weird, but it's true, right? It could be A, it could be black, it could be white, and they're both correct. The fact that you can hold two things that seem opposing in your mind at the same time, he considered the foundation of creativity. He thought that was Shakespeare's greatest quality. It's what makes a great scientist, a great inventor, a great entrepreneur, a great inventor, et cetera, et cetera.
Do you have any examples? I agree most wholeheartedly, but I'd be hard-pressed to give an example off the top of my head.
Well, I'm gonna mess it up horrifically because I don't remember it so well, but there's the story of Louis Pasteur. We're talking about invention and of sort of the whole science of immunology, right? And here I'm having to strain my neurons here to remember it, but basically he had these chickens that had been injected with smallpox or whatever the disease is, right? And then they all died, okay? And then he brought in a new batch of chickens. He's trying to figure out how to solve smallpox or whatever it was. Brought a new batch of chickens in, he injected them, and then they survived. Some of them survived, and he couldn't figure out why. And then he injected them again, and I know I'm messing it up, so please, out there, scientists, don't flame me for this. You know, he's trying to figure out why they survived. And basically, it was because the smallpox that he had injected them with the second batch was weaker. It had been left outside. And so they had developed immunity from it by having this smaller, less intense version of smallpox injected into them. So the next time they got injected, they had the antibodies. Now we take this for granted now, but nobody had a concept for antibodies back then. It was a totally novel concept. And so when he saw these chickens that survived, he was like, why? You know, why, what happened? And he submitted this to other scientists, and they came up with all kinds of ideas that were basically the same ideas rehashed. You know, it was an accident, you have to redo the experiment, or they survived because of this, that, or the other. And he asked himself, well, no, maybe it's something that nobody ever considered. Maybe what had happened was, by having the weaker batch, they were able to somehow survive. So he asked a question that was counterintuitive, right? Which is, injecting someone with something will give them a better chance of surviving it. Which is like, whoa, that's like a contradiction in terms. How can that happen? He was able to entertain this very bizarre idea that contradicted everything in medicine at the same time. He had negative capability, and he displayed it in other aspects of his life as well. And he invented one of the most important breakthroughs in the history of medicine. There are other examples I could give of artists, because it's most common with artists, but people like Einstein had it as well, etc. So that you asked for example. I gave you a bad one. But.
No, that's actually that's a great one. I have one in business I was just thinking about. And because I talk about this in Impact Theory University a lot, you have to be able to hold two competing ideas in your head at the same time.
Yeah.
And the one that I encounter the most is, as a leader, you have to understand that people are intoxicated by certainty in a way that is almost distressing. And in fact, Impact Theory just had our 6th birthday. And one of the founding members, thank you very much, one of the founding members recorded a video of an early memory. And she was like, I remember Tom had so much conviction about what we were going to build, because I had to convince all these people to do the starting literally from scratch. And she was like, Tom had so much conviction that we were going to be able to pull this off. And so one of the things I teach is, you have to be able to create a narrative. You have to be able to say, this is what's going to happen. This is exactly how we're going to do it. And if you can show people that you just really believe to the core that this is going to work, then they'll follow you. The problem is that if you're blinded by your own narrative, you're going to get blindsided. And so you have to have this narrative, you have to present it with conviction, you have to believe it, but then you have to question the shit out of it and make sure that, is this really working? Am I getting the data that I should be getting? Because any conviction like that should make a prediction. If your predictions aren't coming true, then you're in trouble. So it's you have to be convicted and at the same time be hyper skeptical of your own vision.
That's a perfect example. I couldn't have said it better. Thank you.
People can't. That's hard. It's hard.
It's hard, but it's very high level of creativity. And if you can reach it, it's like gold.
You said something earlier that I want to go back to. I've been holding it in my head because it was so intriguing to me.
The Italian woman?
Yes. At the Stanford talk, the one who was annoyed that you said that you could find fulfillment in your work. Why do you think it made her mad? I understand your rebuttal to her, but why did it make her mad?
Well, I think there's a context. First of all, this was like a group of psychologists, very heavy academia, right? High level. And here was this self-help writer from Los Angeles coming to the Stanford Behavioral School, telling us about what is fulfilling. There was an immediate snobbery going on. I could sense it. And I think that was a large part of it. It was like when I went to France, although this was not nearly as bad an example of, this American is going to teach us about seduction? Come on, we're French, right? We taught the world how to seduce. I could laugh then. I thought that we're right, and I felt kind of humbled about that. But this woman, I got a sense of, it wasn't necessarily what I was saying. It rankled them that I was saying. The other thing that rankled her was that I was saying that as an individual, you could change yourself. And I had brought up the example, because it was recently, I was writing about this with the 50 Cent book, about the great African-American writer Richard Wright, who wrote this fabulous novel called Native Son. Is that the name?
There is a book called Native Son.
Yeah.
I don't know if you wrote it, but
And how he had overcome incredible adversity in his life and had written this book, and then basically kind of went downhill from then. But he had resurrected himself through his work, and he had overcome this horrific poverty that he grew up in the South, etc. And I was detailing the process of him as a writer as an example of what I was describing about through your work you reach this level. So there were two things. There was the snobbery element of this Los Angeles, because from LA, people are appreciably dumber further south you go in California, right? If you're in the Bay Area, you're from Los Angeles, you already have a mark against you.
interesting.
A self-help writer from Los Angeles, okay,
It's
already.
about as bad as it gets.
Yeah, all right. And then the other element of, it's not about culture, it's not about the superstructure of society, it's not about some Marxist theory about, your level of income and all of the other things. I was saying this person, this individual, overcame the worst kind of adversity, not through a government program, although I have nothing against government programs. I'm not one of those arch libertarians. I believe in the necessity of government. I'm somebody who's educated through public schools through my whole life, and I love that. But he did it on his own in a process that was very arduous and beautiful. It's like, well, this goes against everything we believe in, that you can't do things on your own, that you need an organization, you need a structure, you need politics, you need this group, you need academics at Stanford to teach you how to get to that point, right? So I was nailed as the self-help writer from Los Angeles who was preaching about individualism, and it fit all the cliches about the American, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? And that's not the trend in academia. The trend is trying to move away. This goes back to the whole structuralist movement and deconstruction, et cetera. It's not the individual that creates a work of art. It's the culture, right? Getting away from the idea that there's a writer, there's a narrator. It's all about the culture. It's impersonal. So what I was saying went against all of the trends in academia, and it really upset them because maybe I'm wrong, but I was challenging some of their deepest held principles, at least for this one woman. She wasn't rude or anything, but I could sense that I had rubbed her the wrong way. And she was very kind of, there was an element of anger underneath her tone.
It's interesting. You just opened up a whole new can of worms. So when you brought her up the first time, you were talking about she was incensed that her father wasn't fulfilled as a truck driver, and that the whole idea that somebody would find their fulfillment through work to her seemed crazy. And when you were talking about it, I was like, okay, why would she get mad about that?
Well, not crazy, but that everybody should do that way. Because I was saying that everyone should have that opportunity. To me, the ultimate anti-elitist belief that even her father, who drove a truck, could have been an artist, could have created something.
Through driving or in some other capacity?
In some other capacity.
Interesting. What about the idea of doing the driving so well that it becomes artistry?
I said that if that was what fulfilled him, I have no problem with that. And if what fulfills you is being a great parent, then that is a form of mastery. When mastery came out, I had some carpenters who were doing the tile work on my patio, and I was interviewed by the New York Times about my book, and I said, he's just as good an example of mastery as Albert Einstein. He was so careful and so precise. He did a brilliant job. He got a great sense of satisfaction of seeing a beautifully done, bit of craftsmanship, right? Craftsmanship is a high form of intellect in my viewpoint. It's actually a great thing, and it's something that people used to value. Look at the cathedrals in Europe, some of the most beautiful things ever created by human beings. Craftsmen, masons, etc. People who can make stained glass, they were masters of it. These are things we need to celebrate. So I have no problem with your form of mastery, whatever it is, if it is driving a truck. But maybe driving a truck isn't something that's fulfilling. And maybe you should consider that about your father.
If you like that clip, check out another powerful clip right here, and I'll see you there.